Good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock, so let's make a start. And welcome to today's planning meeting of the 24th of July. I would like to welcome members of the public, councillors and officers to this meeting. Just really for clarification, I have changed the running orders slightly. The first agenda item will be 3 Keysfield, Paignton. The second one will be Torbay Motel, and the third one will be 43 Thatcher Avenue. So just a slight change there to the running order originally. So now can I please call upon the clerk who will advise how the meeting will be run this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So please note that we are using hybrid meeting arrangements with registered speakers and councillors who are not members of the Planning Committee having the option to join the meeting via Zoom, and are also live streaming this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel to encourage more people to engage in our public meetings. The proceedings of the meeting will also be recorded. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphones when speaking and turn them off when finished. Please can attendees present in person refrain from watching the live stream or joining the Zoom link, as this will cause interference for our viewers. In accordance with the Constitution, members of the public who have registered to speak will be permitted to do so when invited by Madam Chairman. I have confirmed those entitled to speak. We are not expecting any fire alarm testing today. In the event of an evacuation, you will hear a recorded message requesting you to evacuate the building. Please leave by the nearest exit. The Riviera Centre staff will assist you. Once outside, please assemble in front of the tennis courts to the seaward side of the building. Please also ensure that your mobile phone and iPads are turned to silent. Each application will be dealt with in the following order. The Planning Officer will present the submitted application and will outline the proposed recommendation in full. Any speakers registered to speak on the application will be invited to address the committee. This will be taken in the following order: speakers against, neighbourhood forum representatives, any councillors who are not members of the committee, followed by speakers in support of the application. All speakers will have a maximum of 5 minutes each to address the meeting. This will be followed by questions from members and responses from the Planning Officer. Once questions from the committee have concluded, Madam Chairman will open the application for debate. At the conclusion of the debate, Madam Chairman will seek a proposer and seconder for the application. The proposal must be in full and include all information such as conditions or reasons. Madam Chairman will then confirm with the Planning Officer if they wish to enter into a period of summing up. Members, if at any point you leave the meeting for any reason during the consideration of an application, you will be unable to vote on the application. I will now hand the chairing of the meeting over to Madam Chairman, Councillor Jackie Thomas.
Thank you. Clerk, are there any apologies or updates to the membership of the committee, please?
Madam Chairman, I wish to report that an apology has been received from Councillor Darren Cowell, and in accordance with the wishes of the Conservative Group, Councillor Hannah Stevens is substituting for Councillor Anna Cholchard, and Councillor Barbara Lewis is substituting for Councillor Katia Madison.
Thank you. Minutes. To confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of this committee held on the 26th of June 2023. Is there a proposer, please? Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Joyce. And all those in favour, please show. Unanimous, thank you. Declaration of interests. Do any members of the Planning Committee have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests on any of the items on today's agenda, please? Raise your hand. No, none there, thank you. Or do any officers have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests on any of the items on today's agenda, please? No, thank you. Item 4, are there any urgent items, please?
Not as far as I'm aware, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on then to our first item, which is going to be 3 Keysfield Road, Paignton.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So the first item is for 3 Keysfield Road in Paignton, in the area of Roundham. It's a rectangular plot on the north side of Keysfield Road in an area with a residential character, which also contains holiday accommodation as well. The site, here outlined in red, was subject to an application in 2021 to demolish the existing building and redevelop the site to provide 14 apartments. The application was granted outline consent in January 2023, with all matters except for landscaping approved in detail. Hence, this is a reserved matters application relating to landscaping, but it also includes measures to enhance biodiversity pursuant to a requirement of planning condition 2 attached to that permission. So briefly, this is an aerial view of the site. So this is the existing building here, and we have Keysfield Road running along the southern border, and some mature trees along this border and also the eastern border here. And this is a view towards the rear of the site. Again, the existing building. You say holiday and residential to the rear, parking area as well, and there's a slight drop in levels as you go northwards. So this is a street view from 2022, just really for some context, show the dilapidated condition of the villa, and you'll see obviously some of the mature street trees which are within the curtilage of the site. And this is another view just across to the existing building. So moving on to what has already been approved, this is the approved layout, and we have principally parking contained towards the front of the building, providing obviously car parking spaces, also cycle and waste storage, and then a retained garden setting towards the side of the building and rear. So this approval fixed the layout, and the reserve matters are really for the planting detail within this layout. So this is the tree protection plan that was consented at outline stage, which showed the retention of the mature trees along the border with Keysfield Road and also to the side of the plot. Obviously these trees considered of value and are expected to be retained. And really just harking back to the existing permission, this is an indicative view, really just for members to have a flavour of the consent. As discussed, you've got generally a hardscaped parking area towards the front, and then a garden setting that was always expected towards the sides and rear. So this is the proposed landscape plan before you for consideration. As expected, it retains the trees towards the southern border along Keysfield Road and also along the eastern border here. The transition from hard parking area to the garden setting is delineated by a mixed native hedge planting, which is considered acceptable, and this also provides some natural screening of the car parking areas for the future occupants enjoying the amenity areas. Around the building, it's generally laid to lawn with some herb planting areas which are highlighted blue. The expanse of lawn provides some usable outdoor amenity space for occupants and is supported. And then moving towards the rear and side, there is proposed tree and shrub planting which softens the development from when viewed from the north and also screens some view of the proposed building. It also partly screens some views across the borders as well. So this is just a slightly enlarged scale view of the proposed landscaping. So there's some minor tree removal proposed on these grey dotted lines here, on here and here, which are deemed acceptable. And obviously the extent of replanting around the borders provides a net gain in tree planting across the site in general. All matters considered, the landscaping is deemed suitable for approval in accordance with the recommendation to members. In terms of biodiversity features which were sought by condition, the application is supported by an ecological assessment and some details for the provision of bat boxes and bird boxes and bat bricks, within the building, located as shown. These features, plus the range of new deciduous and evergreen tree and shrub specimens, are considered to provide an acceptable solution for the biodiversity net gain expectations. Yeah, just the other views of the elevations where the features are proposed by the ecologist. So in accordance with, in line with the committee report, the key features are really the landscaping and trees and the ecology and biodiversity, as it's a very contained form of application. The Council's tree officer has considered the proposals, and following the receipt of further information on the planting detail and post-planting management, there is support for the proposed detail before you. The biodiversity features have been considered by Devon County Council ecologists, and there is support for the proposals. All matters considered, the recommendation to members is one of approval, together with the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. There are no registered speakers for this item, so committee members, I will now invite questions to the planning officer. Please may I remind members, questions should only cover matters not raised in the presentation. Are there any members wishing to ask a question? Please raise your hand. Councillor Mandy Darling, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I just ask, please, with the landscaping and you talked about screening of the car parking area, are we losing any car parking provision in this or not?
So the car parking provision and the layout was approved at the previous application stage, and that is fixed. So there is no changes to what has been approved. So it's the amount and the layout is as per the consent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions, please, from members? No? Nobody wishing to ask a question of the officer? Okay, thank you. In that case, then, I open this application for debate. Councillor Barbara Lewis.
Thank you, Chairman. As a previous councillor for Roundham with Hyde for over 8 years, this has been a long time coming. Hopefully, this will be the final piece in the jigsaw to get this going and finish the job. The residents of Keysfield Road have put up with enough over the last 10 years and more, so we just need the completion of the site. So therefore, I'm more than happy to propose approval as per the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. We'll come back for you for just a few minutes for your proposal. Is there any more debate, please, from members? No? Okay, thank you very much. In that case, I go back to Councillor Barbara Lewis once again, just to clarify your proposal. Thank you.
Yes, I said I'm more than happy to propose approval as per officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Pentney.
Yes, happy to second that.
Thank you very much. Is there any further debate on the proposal and the seconder? No. In that case then, I think we'll go to the vote. All in favour? That's unanimous. Yeah, thank you very much. This application is approved. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move straight on to the former Torbay Holiday Motel site on the Totnes Road, Paignton. The clerk has confirmed those who have registered to speak upon entry to the meeting, so I will therefore ask Mr. Scott Jones to introduce the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you just bear with me while we get up the presentation? Just take a second.
Yes, certainly, no problem. We'll just take a few minutes and then we will hear the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So the second application is an outline application at the site of the former Torbay Holiday Motel at Collerton St Mary, Paignton. And it's an application for the demolition and redevelopment for up to 30 dwellings with detailed access and matters of appearance, landscaping, layout and scale reserved for future consideration. So this is the site outlined in red, with a grouping of existing buildings central here. And this is an aerial view. This is taken some years ago. So we've got 5 main buildings grouped together with an area of landscaping and a pool, and a large expanse of tarmac around the buildings and along the frontage near to the Totnes Road. Development to the right here is Beachtown Park, which is a mobile home site, which gains its access across the site in question here. And to the left here, we have some apartments, Beachtown Court, which also gains access through the site. We have fields to the south, which rise, and across the road, you'll see there's further holiday uses in the vicinity. So this is an existing plan of the site. Principal information on here to members is the contour lines, where it shows land rising at the rear. So every line shows a rise or fall in levels of 0.5 metre. So we've got, say, it's generally flat around the entrance to the building and the central area of buildings, and it rises to the rear into the field systems, and also there's a drop in levels towards the east with Beachtown Park. So this is a front-on view of the main complex of buildings just east of the existing access. It shows the dilapidated condition of the buildings and the site in general, and the dominance of tarmac along the frontage with the Totnes Road, which is quite open and highly visible behind a low stone wall. So this is a view looking eastwards across the existing entrance. You can see just touched on how open the frontage is and how readily apparent the development is within the immediate street scene. And towards the northeastern corner of the site, near to the access with Beachtown Park here, we have a view back to the development, which is largely screened by these trees, and we, in the distance, have Beachtown Court Apartments, which is outside of the application site. And then obviously you see the fields rising to the rear. And this is just a view just turned around from that position, looking at the existing access to Beachtown Park site, you know, in the corner of the site. So just in terms of some context, we have the site here marked. So it's part of a wider future growth area, which is highlighted in the pink colouring, which is expected to deliver homes in and around the area across a number of sites, where consent has been obviously already given for 73 dwellings on this field north of the Totnes Road, and there is a further consent for 100 dwellings further eastwards on a site opposite the Ocean Garage and Parker's Arms on the hillside opposite those. In terms of this particular site, around 40 units is expected on the former Motel site within the Torbay local plan. Just moving on to the neighbourhood plan, it's also an identified housing site there, highlighted in yellow here. Again, the identified yield, i.e. number of units for this site, is around 40. And finally, in terms of the most prominent policy context, Colleton St Mary is also subject to an adopted master plan for the area to help guide and deliver the expected housing through the future growth area designation. So this is an indicative layout of how development could be delivered on the Motel site within that master plan area, and it shows you some of the key aspirations as well. So the master plan indicated around 25 to 30 units expected on the site, and included the importance of safeguarding a link into the wider phases through this route here. Also reinforcing the southern boundary, acknowledging some ecological constraints in the area, the aspiration for some open space within the development, and also securing a future link to the caravan site if that was required. So moving on to the scheme before you, as I say, the proposal seeks detailed access with all other matters reserved for future consideration. So that's layout, scale, appearance and landscaping will be considered at a later stage if granted consent. And the submission includes indicative detail to support the notion that the amount of development proposed, up to 30 dwellings, could be appropriately delivered in terms of a form and functioning development. And the detailed access arrangements with the revised access off the Totnes Road is obviously submitted in detail, which I'll show you in a second on that. So the key outcomes here, generally if we're looking at the frontage to Totnes Road, we're looking at some good urban design principles of frontage development facing the main road, providing an attractive and active form of development to this key arterial road. Also got some strong landscape expectations along that border as well, which will A, soften the development, but also B, soften the residential environment behind the landscaping feature. We have the link to the southeastern corner, as expected through the master planning process to potential future phases. And we've got some strong landscaping along the southern boundary to address the ecological constraints that the site has. And we have here some expected play space, again in accordance with the aspirations of the adopted master plan. We have routes to either side to Beachdown Court here, and also a route to Beachdown Park to the east. The layout has been assessed and generally considered to deliver a good quality, or foundations for a good quality residential environment. The footprints of dwellings provide an indication that the minimum space standards can be secured for each dwelling, and also gardens that exceed the local plan expectations in terms of size of amenity space. The layout also delivers 2 parking spaces per dwelling in accordance with local plan parking standards, and generally a pleasant living environment and appropriate layout is shown. So moving on to the detailed aspect of the development, we have here a plan of the proposed access point, which has been revised through the course of the application to overcome some highway authority concerns. So we have a new access point, approximately 17 metres to the east of the existing access point, the centre of which is here. And we have some road widening to permit the provision of a right-hand turn into the site. The initial part of the access is designed to be 6 metres wide to accord with the expectations and future development within the area as a sort of local distributor road. And it provides a footway and a footway cycleway to the side. The revised detail following the changes now has the support of the Highway Authority. And this is just a broader plan of where the access is in the site, and also showing the provision of adequate visibility displays. So this is an indicative landscape plan. Again, landscape would be considered again at reserved matter stage should outline consent be granted, but it shows a strategy and expectations for what may come forward. So again, we've got a strong frontage to Totnes Road, which provides a softening of the development and improves the residential environment for any dwellings that do front that road. We've got street trees and trees throughout the development. We've got a strong border along the south and the area of play space. So there are some indicative house types submitted with the application. Again, matters of appearance would be considered at a later stage. However, these provide a flavour of what the applicant is suggesting. So we've got a mix of materials, suggesting to be stone and potentially timber cladding, and just using a variety of house types, obviously with elements of render. And they also provide some indicative street scenes. So the top view here is indicative view from the Totnes Road, looking at the sort of gateway to the development. So it's got, see, potentially how it can be softened behind landscaping, how the buildings can be utilising different materials, including stone, and on the prominent sections at the entrance, and including matters such as, active side elevations to enlighten the design and general character there. So the bottom one is the view towards the Totnes Road. So down in the bottom corner would be where the suggested play area is, and this would be the principal route through. So there has been some discussion about potential access through the site for large vehicles servicing Beachtown Park. And the applicant has submitted very recently an indicative layout with a dual link option. So, as mentioned, the applicant is seeking principally detailed access from the Totnes Road, and the matters beyond that would be considered at a later stage. Whether that's delivered in a single access point, as per the current arrangement, or a dual access point, there is the opportunity for that to be assessed at a later date. What this plan is seeking to do is provide comfort that if restrictions do require a second point, there is the ability to deliver that without unduly affecting the delivery of the quantum of development shown. So this principally provides greater comfort that the resolution of ongoing access issues to existing residential uses to either side of the site could be secured. So just picking out some of the key issues from the committee report in terms of the design and visual impact and residential amenity matters. Although all matters are reserved except for the access, it is a material consideration whether the amount of development is likely to be able to be delivered within an acceptable form. As detailed within the report, the indicative layouts and supporting information is considered to show a basic framework that can deliver some key outcomes in terms of how the development will look and how it will function, which is sufficient for this stage of an outline application. In terms of highway safety, the detailed access is considered acceptable following revised plans secured through the course of the application, and it's supported by the Highway Authority. In terms of ecology and biodiversity, the site sits within the landscape connectivity zone associated with the Greater Horseshoe Bat and the South Hams special area of conservation. That is a key material consideration in terms of the ecology context, and adequate detail at this point has been submitted to satisfy the Devon County Council ecologists and Natural England that there would unlikely to be a significant effect on this protected species and is suitable for approval on ecology grounds for this and other protected species and habitats. In terms of other considerations, obviously the MPPF outlines that decisions should apply the presumption in favour of sustainable development, which means approving development proposals that accord with an up-to-date development plan without delay. As detailed within the committee report, it's concluded that development does accord with the development plan, and hence there is support for the grant of permission in line with the MPPF. So the officer recommendation to members is one of approval, subject to the conditions outlined, with the final drafting of conditions delegated to the Divisional Director for Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, but subject to revised condition 9 on connectivity, which I'll show members in a second. The completion of a Section 106 agreement that secures heads of terms in accordance with the adopted planning contributions and affordable housing supplementary planning document on terms of acceptable to officers, and the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following planning committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. So the revised condition 9 regarding the connectivity is worded as proposed on screen, which is principally there to provide greater clarity and certainty on securing access and egress detail to Beachtown Park and Beachtown Court for the necessary vehicle movements, where previously it detailed matters for the pedestrian and cycle links detailed there. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Jones. I now call on Councillor Brooke to address the meeting. Councillor Brooke, you have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you have just 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Before I start, Madam Chair, I just wanted to apologise to the committee that I'm not there in person. Some of you will know my daughter went into premature labour with twins last Wednesday. I'm pleased to say they were born this morning at 5 a.m, but you can imagine I'm exhausted and I need to still be up in where I am now, so thank you. The Torbay Motel has been an eyesore for over 10 years. And it's situated, as you've just seen, parallel to Beachtown Park. Both sites were originally owned by the Booth family, the family providing access to Beachtown Park over Motel land. The motel has caused increasing problems to these residents over the last 10 years with the ramping up of antisocial behaviour, which has caused fear and intimidation to the residents there, which, as you may know, is more disturbing and distressing when you consider that the average age of residents there is over 70. In the original indicative plans, Madam Chair, there were numerous objections were received, highlighting one potential massive issue that would have caused 200 residents to be cut off from primary services. And the planning officer just now has shown what that might have been at the top of the entrance into Beachtown Park. Beachtown Park follows a one-way system, and the egress point with the original drawings would have been impossible for service vehicles, fire engines and the like to have done a hairpin turn, and such it would have left Beachtown Park residents cut off. I did have meetings with the officer who's just spoken to raise this as a massive concern, and I'm very pleased to see that the developers have now put forward a potential solution to that within their change of indicative plan, although that came in on Friday last week. Why I'm speaking now, Madam Chair, is just to get full assurance that this very essential matter is dealt with when it comes forward and therefore goes in reserve matters. I did notice that there's been now a change to make that happen, so I'm really pleased with that. The residents are very fearful, very anxious. They've been anxious and fearful for months, thinking they're going to be cut off. And I just want that assurance that they are being protected as we go through this process. Overall, the residents are happy with the development. They want it to be developed. They want it to go. It's caused so much problem for them. So they are generally supportive of the development, but they're just fearful of what may come. They want to know that that problem with egress from Beachtown is resolved properly. And otherwise, I would thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. I now call Michael Drake of Eden Property Group to address the meeting in support of the application. Would you like to come to the table then? Thank you very much. You have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you have just 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I won't need 5 minutes. I thought the officer's report and presentation were very comprehensive, and actually Councillor Brooke has picked up on a few of the items that I was going to raise anyway, so I don't need to run over the same issues, to be honest. I wanted to just provide some reassurance on the issue of access. It's very clear from representations we've received that, understandably, it's a concern for some of the residents of Beachtown Park. As you've heard, they access their properties through our site, so I can understand why some change on our site would cause some nervousness on their part. We're only applying for the access at this stage onto the A385. That has been a very detailed technical exercise with highway experts in terms of locating the access, the design, specification, the radius of the junction, providing a bus shelter in lieu of the bus stop, getting all of those elements and aspects correct. And understandably, that's been a highway safety-led exercise. So we have to be mindful of the future context. Our site, as you've heard earlier, will serve that wider development piece in the adopted College of St Mary Master Plan. So our access has to be designed to suit that, as well as existing needs, both in terms of Beachtown Court, Beachtown Park, and of course our site as well. So the detail layout is a reserved matter. We'll be looking at a detail in due course. We do understand and actually have a legal obligation to provide vehicular access into Beachdown Park, although I understand from a practical point of view it may well be that we need to do more than legal obligation. Of course, we want to make sure that's all delivered in due course. But in terms of where we are today, it's a technical exercise, highway safety led for the new access onto the A385. That's the position it needs to be, as we've been advised by highway specialists, and council highway officers have supported as well. And we hope this is just stage one of a two-stage process. We can move forward today with a positive recommendation, hopefully an approval, and we can get working on stage two and delivering a scheme that works for both us, the wider master plan, and our neighbours at Beachdown Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. If you'd like to take your seat. Thank you very much. Committee members, I will now invite questions to the Planning Officer. Please may I remind members you should only cover matters not raised in the presentation. Are there any members wishing to ask a question, please? Councillor Billings.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I have two very brief quick questions. The first one is to officers. I heard the applicants just refer to the fact that the onward connectivity from this site onto third-party sites was a reserved matter, i.e. that was, in the applicant's view, being determined a landscape matter. Would officers concur that that's the correct way of looking at this so that we can proceed with this application, please? That's my first question.
So my understanding is that the detailed access is purely the access off the public highway, of the A385 Totnes Road, and the internal road layout would be part of the reserved matters for layout for future consideration.
Thank you, that's helpful. And then the second quick question I've got in terms of timing, in terms of previous applications this committee's considered, we've suggested a shorter time period to bring forward reserved matters in order to get development moving. We've just heard the local ward councillors speak about the local enthusiasm in getting this site moving. Have we given thought to a shorter time period than the standard 3 years that we often give?
In brief response, no, we haven't.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Fox, thank you.
Thank you for a comprehensive report on this. Just one question in relation to the comments from NHS Devon on financial contributions. If you go to page 36, where you outline the local financial considerations, should there be a section in there covering the NHS request for just over £15,000 to mitigate the impact to the additional households?
Thank you for the question. So, as detailed in the report, there was 2 requests for health-based obligations. One of those was supported, having consulted and discussed the matter with strategic colleagues, and that's one that delivers in increasing the local capacity. So that should be sought through a section 106. The second obligation wasn't considered achievable and shouldn't be detailed. So I'll just double check the list, but it should be detailed there. Yes, you're correct.
Are you happy? Yes, thank you. Any, oh, yes, I do have another one. Councillor Billings, you have a further question. Thank you.
Thank you. On page 16 of the officer's report, towards the bottom, sorry, that's the committee report, towards the bottom, sorry, it might not be page 16 on all of them. Some of the pagination is a bit different. Bear with me a second. Sorry, Madam Chair. Page 11, my mistake. It refers to a relevant planning history. as per the comment that's in the report, in relation to application P 2019-0615, it would be helpful to understand the current status of that application.
So that application was resolved to be approved by members of the Planning Committee. It's still pending formal consideration, principally as the Section 106 legal agreement hasn't been signed, which is partly the reason for this current application before members.
Do we have a bit more explanation as to why it's not been signed, perhaps?
It's to do with land ownership issues and not being able to secure the appropriate signatures of all landowners within the red line. Hence, this current application has a slightly smaller red line to try and overcome that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Any further questions from members, please? Councillor Barbara Lewis, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. In the report, page 14, there's an £8,000 106 contribution for a traffic road order. Can you explain, maybe I'm being a bit thick, can you explain why they've got up to 10 years to carry out the actual works, please?
So that recommendation was based on comments received from the Highway Authority. I think it's principally due to the fact that the impact on the road and the character of the road is borderline. Because the TRO is principally to do with movements of the speed restrictions outward. So I think the comments are principally based on the impact being borderline and hence when they want to deliver the speed changes or the changes to the speed limit. So it's not a pressing need. And you say their request was that, you know, they should possibly lengthen the period in which it's secured, so it's secured at the right time.
Thank you. Does that satisfy your question? Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Fox. You're next.
I don't know if it's relevant to this stage, so forgive me, Chair, if I'm jumping the gun. In relation to the housing need for Torbay, it's just an interesting background stat that's in today's planning magazine, I noticed, where they do a list of every council in the land. Torbay is in the lowest category, in other words, the worst off, with 2.52 years identified. So just for members to have that in the background, that there are very serious housing needs in Torbay, and they're in today's planning magazine.
Was there a question there, Councillor Fox?
Well, that's why I asked you to forgive me if I got this wrong. It was a comment, so I just... Obviously, if officers would like to comment on that, I welcome that, but it's probably a bit unfair to put one on the spot in that sense. But just let everybody know that the figure is a public figure. It's for every council. I think there's one or two in the Midlands that have been deleted from the requirement, and I don't understand why. But everybody else, all the way from Northumberland down to Cornwall, and it's 2.52 years when we're talking about a 5-year requirement. So it is serious.
Yeah, I think really that one was a little bit more for the debate section. But yeah, by all means, bring that back up. But thank you very much. Are there any more questions to officers at this point? Everybody happy they've explored all their questions? In that case, I will move to the debate then, please. Thank you. Councillor Billings, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the absence of any points that my colleagues want to explore in debate, I do have a proposal, and that's approval subject to conditions. I don't know whether it's helpful to have a debate on those conditions, because as Councillor Fox was just describing, I think and we heard also from Councillor Brooke, the local ward councillor, this is a scheme that I think members might wish to see happen. And so therefore I might sort of suggest I'm prepared to propose approval subject to conditions and then have a discussion with those. Would that be a sensible way to continue, Madam Chair?
Yes, I'm quite happy with that, unless there are any other debate on any other issues before we move into Councillor Billings.
I would support Councillor Billings, Madam Chairman.
So
on that.
we'll
I would
go back.
second it.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Fox. So we'll go back to Councillor Billings and for your proposal, and then we will debate on that matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So members, my proposal would be approval. I would be proposing approval based on the revised officer conditions. So that's to include a revision of condition 9 and connectivity. And I would be also adding a specific note in relation to condition 9 that we heard earlier, that the applicant themselves considered that the onward connectivity from the site to third-party land to be a landscape matter rather than an access matter, just so to ensure that there's no lack of clarity on that point. And then going on in terms of additional conditions, I would like to see an additional condition to specifically draw out the setback distance from the highway that we've currently got in this scheme, that we'd like to see that being repeated at a reserved matters stage. It occurred to me that the officers identified, and I agree with the report, that there's an active and positive frontage because of the setback distance, and I think that's very important that we see that come forward again at a reserved matters stage, and I think it's relevant to bring up now because clearly in part that active and positive frontage results from the quantum of development, which is what we're discussing now. I'd also like to see a condition, so this is a second additional condition, requiring landscape and appearance enhancements to Beachdown Court and the associated parking area. And in particular, when I refer to that, I'm going to give some reasons in a minute. What I'm talking about, officers, is the section of land to the right-hand side as viewed from the main road, which is within the blue edged line, i.e. the ownership, as I understand it, from the of the current owners. I note that so not all drawings have shown that area to be edged blue, but the most recent ones have. So if there's any lack of clarity around ownership, then we could relate this as a Grampian condition. And my reason in relation to that, I would draw attention to the Colleton St Mary master plan, and in particular page 30, which specifically identifies this site. It creates a local centre with strong frontage, and its development impacts the viability of the remainder of the master plan area. So with that having been written in the master plan, I think it's important that we get the gateway to the remaining area that this site's providing correct, and clearly the Beachdown Court to immediately to the right-hand side of that gateway entrance, I think is relevant to that. And then as a third point, I would like to see a condition in relation to the time period, and so this is possibly a slight revision of one of the ones in the officer report, with that reserve matters coming forward in 2 years, not 3 years, to try to drive forward development given the housing need. And then I would suggest the final drafting of all conditions to be delegated to the Assistant Director of Planning to get the wording on some of those. So just picking up the two key ones that we've added, and that is the setback distance, and I believe that comes from creation of an active and positive frontage, and possibly policies DE1, DE3 and PNP1, and then also the landscape and appearance enhancements to Beachdown Court. And I think that we can relate to the same set of policies, but also draw attention to our Colleton St Mary master plan, which is an adopted SPD, and the comments in relation to the creation of a a local centre with a strong frontage, and the viability of the remainder of the master plan area being developed from that, and those are at page 30 of the master plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Before we go over to Councillor Fox, who I believe were in a mind to second, we'll go to our officers just to clarify where we are. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, in relation to the additional condition in relation to Beachdown Court, which, as we understand it, is within the blue line, so within the applicant's control, the committee needs to be satisfied that the conditions necessary, and as I've advised before, basically needs to ask itself the question whether the development would be unacceptable without that condition, and that's sort of the test that ought to be applied by the committee in relation to that additional condition.
Thank you. Mr Emerson, do you have anything to add?
Just in terms of the other proposals, Councillor Billings, quite happy with that strong message about getting on with development, so that's reduced to 2 years. We haven't approached the developer about that, but I think they've already expressed the intent to get on and do that, so I think that's a positive message from this committee. And on the other one, the setback, as we talked about on site, is something really important to us in terms of the design and layout. So that is something we would seek anyway as part of the next stage, the reserve matters, but we can explicitly state that. And through you, Chair, if you're happy, as we did with the previous committee, when a proposer, depending on the outcome, proposes additional conditions, the wording of, we would go back to Councillor Billings and just confirm with him that that reflected what was being said. But all of those relevant policies in the local plan and the neighbourhood plan would be applied to the reason for these conditions. So I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you, Mr Emerson. Councillor Billings, are you happy with the explanation? Thank you.
I am. Thank you, Madam Chair. And just responding to the legal advice we've just had from officers, I'm clear in my mind that the condition that I've referred to in relation to Beachdown Court is necessary in planning terms. We're taking development a lot closer to that site. Currently, that building sort of has a long gap. We're taking this new development very close to it, and it will become a much more strong point going forward in terms of its appearance, because it will be right next to a junction and a gateway point. So I think I'm clear in my mind that is a necessary part of this development.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Fox, I believe that you were happy to propose second. Are you still happy with the conditions applied? Thank you.
The condition about the relationship and the gateway and the legal advice we've just had, I've got a kind of question mark in my mind now about how necessary that is. It's desirable. Nobody's doubting that. I just wonder whether Councillor Billings could just explain a little bit further on that one as to why it's necessary as opposed to desirable.
Thank you. Councillor Billings, are you happy to reply to that?
I am, Madam Chair. I just wanted to find the very relevant section of the Colleton St Mary draft master plan, so just give me a few moments.
Thank you.
Okay, so just committee, just to quote from the Colleton St Mary draft master plan, which is an adopted SPD by this council, and it says, and I read, at the western end of the village is the vacant motel site. It is surrounded by occupied uses on either side, including a static caravan site along its eastern boundary and a car showroom and dwellings to the west. The the development of this site will affect the long-term viability of the rest of the master plan proposals. This first phase needs to be designed and laid out in such a way as to ensure that access is safeguarded, and then we read on. In essence, this first phase will form one of two major gateways into the southern part of the master plan. Therefore, its primary value is not in achieving maximum housing numbers on the site, but rather in providing a gateway into the larger area. Now, I could draw out other bits of this, Councillor Fox, but just indulge me, I'm looking at a rather lengthy document here. Elsewhere, and I specifically wrote down that, from my notes, that the development of this site will affect the viability of the remainder. And so what I see we have behind this site is we have some greenfield development which will, the master plan propose, come forward for development later. What the authors of that master plan were talking about was ensuring that there's adequate access and flow through into that. And so therefore we're drawing attention for the centre to this site as a way of gateway in. And it occurs to me that we therefore need to ensure that to act as a gateway, it has proper amenity for all of those who will go through it into further and deeper parts of the site. And throughout the development of the master plan, it was always assumed that the whole of the site was one. So in other words, the Beachdown Court area to the right-hand side, viewed from the public highway, was part of that area. Now, clearly, they could have, the site promoters at the time had the opportunity to try to exclude areas. They had the opportunity to do that. And indeed, in fairness, if we look at the housing numbers we've been told about, the housing numbers here are commensurate to what the site was as a whole, expected to deliver, excluding those units. So in other words, we are, my understanding is, and officers correct me if I'm wrong, we're actually on this site delivering, because we're not taking away the existing houses on Beachdown Court, we're actually providing more houses than was provided in the master plan. So given the fact that there's a viability enhancement to this applicant from that, and given the fact that this is the gateway into other land uses, which is the precise reason that this previous section 106 couldn't be achieved, in my eyes, it's very necessary to ensure that it's developed in a holistic way and that there's suitable provision for enhancing the landscape and appearance of Beachdown Court. In my eyes, that goes beyond simply being desirable as being necessary. I wouldn't come to that view if it wasn't for the fact that this is a gateway to third-party land. And I think it's that tips the balance in my eyes.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Fox.
Madam Chairman, I just wonder if I could just ask for a legal response to that. Because you made the point before, sorry, I don't know your name, but legal officer, if you've heard what Councillor Billings has quite eloquently explained, but I just wonder from your kind of hard legal-nosed position whether you're satisfied with that or not.
Well, it's Mr. Cattrall. Then to you, Madam Chairman. It's a matter for the committee to consider, but it's not for me to say, but Councillor Billings has put forward some cogent reasons there, and I don't see the committee agree with them why they can't agree with the condition. But at the end of the day, it's for the committee to decide that they consider it necessary for the reasons given, for example, by Councillor Billings.
Madam Chairman, based on those comments, Mr. Cottrell's comments, and from Mr. Councillor Billings has said, I would be prepared to support Councillor Billings on all three of the conditions he suggested, and second that.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. So you're happy to second Councillor Billings' proposal. Is there any more debate, please, on the proposal and the seconder? Thank you. Okay. No more debate then, and so we will go to the vote. So all in favour of the motion on the table? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So I declare the application approved. Okay, we'll just take about a 5-minute break. So if we see you back about 10 past. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we're moving on to our next item agenda, which is to consider an application for 43 Thatcher Avenue, Torquay. The clerk has confirmed those who have registered to speak upon entry to the meeting. I will therefore ask Mr. David Edmondson to introduce the application, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This application for roof alterations from the hip to a flat roof to create this first floor extension with first floor balcony to the front is on 43 Thatcher Avenue. A number of members went to a site visit this morning, very useful to be able to look at the site from different directions, to enter the site and to go to the rear of the property as well and see the relationship with adjoining properties and properties to the rear. The property has had extensions in the past, and you can see where it's situated here. There have been a number of recent approvals for more contemporary extensions to properties in Thatcher Avenue, and we saw a couple as we drove around to the top of the site up here. But we have received a number of objections to this particular application, and it was referred to Planning Committee from Councillor Bye through the site review meeting process. So the current property, very flat pitched, a very shallow pitched dormer, not dormer bungalow, just bungalow, with undercroft garage there and an existing sort of terrace above. You can see the adjoining property at 41 on higher with a gable end, and then 45 coming down the hill to the right of that image down to here. We walked onto the site, up the side here, you recall, and went to the rear of the property. So there's the footprint of the building. You could see as we walked around, the site is well developed. A relatively small rear garden now, quite a large area at the front with driveway and planting, but various extensions, including a flat roof section in the middle at the rear there. And the proposals are to, sorry, the existing elevations as well, just to give you an idea of the various alterations that have happened to the rear. These are that's the dining area we saw to the rear of the property with the French windows, and the difference in height from the garage at the front to that terraced area. And the footprint floor plan of the existing property. You can see a myriad of different roof styles, including that flat roof section in the middle there, and pitched roofs at the rear and at the front of the property on a very shallow pitch. There's a couple of flat roofs on the side there and at the rear. So there's no change to the overall footprint as we saw on site, but the changes are to create this first floor extension. There's been a revision to the scheme whilst it's been live to reduce the width of this first floor. So effectively is taking off that shallow pitch roof off the existing bungalow and creating a flat roof extension on the top. The officers negotiated a reduction in the width of the first floor extension by 1.2 metres on either side, in order to step it back from the edge and lessen any impact, but also to address issues potentially of overlooking to the sides of the property. You'll see in a moment there are no windows apart from this high level obscure glazed window on the southwest elevation, but no windows on that northeast elevation. Just going back to that previous image. So it creates this balcony above the existing roof of the property with glazed sections and a glazed balustrading in front. You can understand why the owners of the property would wish to do this, obviously to modernise the building and take advantage of incredible outlook and views across, but we have to look at the effect on anybody's privacy and overlooking as part of that consideration of the application. We've also had comments from a property at the back, which I'll look at in a moment, but they are much higher than the existing property. That's at 10 Wimborne Close behind, and their comments relate to the harm to their amenities. So there are 3 windows of different shapes on the rear of the property, one with and a fourth one with an obscure glazing. So the materials have changed as well. Initially this was all white render and did look more stark. It's changed to a standing seam cladding and also timber cladding in amongst the French windows there, and does break up the appearance of the building and lessen the visual impact of the property. It's 1.9 metres higher than the existing ridge height, and in a moment we'll see an image that shows the comparison with this property and the adjoining properties. So that's the rear elevation. We walked round to the back and saw those French windows and looked up to where the extension would be. Moving on to the side elevations, as I mentioned, no windows on that side adjoining 45, but one high-level window adjoining 41. And then 40, the other way around, 43, this is 43, 45 and 41. And then grey furnished windows to the sides and to the front there. And the image I was referring to earlier, this is the elevation drawing looking at the street scene. I'm not sure how clear that is on the screen, but you can see some red lines there giving an indication of existing ridge heights of the existing properties, going down the hillside, and a general sort of dropping down towards the bottom end of this street, but and an indication of the height of the first floor extension on the top here. And on this image, an indication of how that roof plan looks like. It's effectively an observation room on that top floor. And then a staircase being created in the hall to get up into that space above, and a lift facility provided within the property. And that's a cross-section showing the image of that observation space and the proposed balcony. We've proposed a planning condition to limit, to put an obscure glaze section on the side of the balcony area up to a height of 1.8 metres to prevent overlooking to the sides of the property, and then the remainder to the front is normal sort of balustrading height. And you can see the increase to create that floor to ceiling height up in the first floor there. That gives quite a good indication of the change in level on this site and the difference between this property and the adjoining ones. And there's a few photographs of the back of the property, the flat roof sections that were mentioned earlier on and we saw on site, looking across to the adjoining property, and again looking to the back of it. There's the existing very shallow pitched roof on the bungalow, and the flat roof is in behind there, and then a couple of low pitches on the rear of the property. So the key issues, the principle of development that is within flood zone 1, it's the impact on the visual character of the street, impact on residential amenity, and I think the officer's judgment is that we have seen more contemporary, more modern solutions to extending these properties, and believe this doesn't cause any adverse effect to both the character of the area or the residential amenity of the adjoining properties. And then effects on ecology, flood risk and drainage, highways and sustainability are the key factors with this application, but none of those are adversely affected by the proposal. And the local plan policies related to design, development amenity, domestic extension, flood risk, biodiversity and geodiversity. We didn't have any comments from the neighbourhood planning group, but their policy talked about TH8, the established architecture. This application, as I mentioned, often would be a delegated application, but I think is here because of the number of responses and from Councillor By's referral. But from our point of view, the recommendation to you as officers is that it should be approved with the conditions outlined in the report. I mentioned that one particularly about the height of the balustrading to protect the privacy of properties either side, and any other considerations that may come to light following committee to be delegated to Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency. recognise there's been a few objections put in by planning consultants on behalf of local residents and understand the different take on the impact on adjoining properties and on the street scene. But from our assessment, we believe it does comply with DE3 and should be approved as an application. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Edmondson. I now call Kim Walker of Taylor Whitehouse Planning to address the meeting against the application. If you'd like to take a seat at the front, thank you. You have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. My name is Kim Walker of Taylor Whitehouse Planning and I'm a planning consultant acting on behalf of several neighbours to the proposed development at number 43 Thatcher Avenue. Thank you for permitting me to make this representation on their behalf. Before highlighting the key material planning considerations, I would like to draw members' attention to a number of misleading inaccuracies within the committee report itself. The first point is in relation to the description of the site. On page 2, which describes the property as being modest in scale and within a large plot, Section 2 also states that the plot is considered to be large in size and would comfortably accommodate the development without resulting in overdevelopment. This is completely contradictory to the red line site plan on page 1 of the report, where it can be clearly seen that on this side of the road, number 43 is actually the largest, most sprawling property, occupying a significant portion of the plot. The existing footprint alone would usually be considered to be overdevelopment of the site in itself. The second misleading point within Section 3 relates to the planning history search, which the report states shows that a number of recent similar proposals have been approved within the wider immediate street scenes. This is contradictory. Is the officer referring to the wider area or the immediate area? There are no properties of this character in the immediate area. From the start of Thatcher Avenue from Widbourne Road, apart from a very few contemporary alterations, there are no variations from the traditional design of the houses until the road splits to rejoin Ilsham Marine Drive. However, these are very different plots, much larger in size, with greater widths between properties. This part of the report also only assesses the material impact to the neighbours on each side, numbers 41 and 45. There is no reference at all to the properties at the rear, namely numbers 6, 8 and 10 Widbourne Close. The report goes on to state that the addition of these upper floor windows would not present any undue impact from overlooking to either properties or casual overlooking of garden areas. However, there is no assessment at all of the overlooking of the Widbourne Close properties. Of these first floor rear windows, only one window has been proposed to be fitted with obscure glass. The 3 further windows are all clear, providing direct overlooking of the rear gardens and currently private bedrooms and living spaces of the Widbourne Close properties. This would be clearly obvious had a site visit to the Widbourne Close properties been undertaken. Section 3 of the report also states that 10 objections have been received, with a number of representations made by the same person. There have been objections from 10 separate neighbours at 1, 2, 4, 6 and 8 and 10 Widbourne Close and numbers 41, 45 and 49 Thatcher Avenue. Each neighbour has made representations twice, given that even though they were not reconsulted, they have the right to submit further comments in relation to the proposed amendments. It is therefore misleading to state that a number of representations were made by the same person. I turn now to the material planning considerations not already mentioned in the inaccuracies of the report. Height. There will be an increase in ridge height of 1.9 metres. The plan indicates that it will be slightly lower than the highest point of number 45. However, this is incorrect. The predominant ridge height line of number 45, running east-west, will be lower than the proposed extension at number 43. The proposed extension will also be slightly taller than number 41. Contrary, therefore, to what has been written in the report, the proposal will not sit comfortably between numbers 41 and 45, and the increase in height will result in overshadowing of existing windows of both properties, both in the morning and the evening, and a dominant appearance. Design. This design is not in accordance with paragraph 130 of the MPPF, nor local plan policies DE1 or DE5 of the Torquay Neighbourhood Plan Policy TH8. The proposed development is not visually attractive, does not maintain any sense of place, and most certainly is not sympathetic to the local character of the area. Comparing the style of the proposed development to number 43 to number 41 is incorrect. Number 41 has a flat roof, but this was built in the late 1960s.
1 minute remaining.
And is significantly lower than the neighbouring buildings, and it does not obstruct or overshadow the neighbouring properties. While the revised drawings show the first floor being reduced in size, it is now, instead of being finished in render, proposed to be clad in standing seam metal. Far from appearing as a roof feature, this will instead introduce a grey box finished in a material which will result in a stark change to the existing character and appearance of the street scene. It is a mishmash of continuous extensions and alterations. Finally, I would like to refer to the planning application process. Two of the adjoining properties, 8 and 10 Widbourne Close, did not receive notification letters of the application in the first instance, and all neighbours have advised that there was no site notice, which is contrary to the provisions of the Development Management Procedure Order. There was also no reconsultation with any commenters when the revised plans were received, as the amendments were considered to address comments from neighbours. The plans have not, however, addressed the genuine neighbour concerns. In concluding, the size, scale and design of
Thank
the proposed
you, Mrs.
extension...
Walker. Your 5 minutes are up. Thank you very much. If you'd like to take your seat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, I will now invite questions to the planning officer. Please may I remind members, questions should only cover matters not raised in the presentation. Are there any members wishing to ask questions of the officer? Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I have clarification from our officers that a yellow site notice was put on the lamppost? There seems to be one just a little bit further down the road, just to ensure that we've done everything that we needed to in terms of the consultation process.
No, there wasn't a site notice for this site. Immediate neighbours would have been notified. It's clear that perhaps 2 or 3 of them were missed and then were done afterwards, but there wouldn't have been a site notice for domestic extensions of this nature. So.
And we're happy from a legal perspective that that's okay, are we?
It's not in a conservation area or anything like that, which is one of the triggers for making sure we do a site notice in addition to those immediate neighbour comments.
I think in fairness, given the fact we've got a number of neighbours commented, I suppose we can take the view that the neighbours are aware of the proposals. In relation to the drawings, just wondering whether we can have clarity. One of the street scene view drawings, and I think it appeared on the presentation, Mr. Edmondson, could you just go back slightly? It was the one that had the dashed lines that connected it to the neighbouring properties. That, just before that one. Can I have clarity from officers that's not the proposal we're looking at?
This is the point I was raising on site, that the balustrading appears on this image to go right to the edges of the roof of the ground floor, and actually the balustrading is only going the width of the extension, the first floor extension. And when I mentioned about obscure glazing at the ends, I meant at the edges of that section, yes.
So in terms of drawings that were we to be resolving to approve, that would not be one of the drawings we would be approving, would it?
It would be based on a later image, which I'll show you in a second, of the proposed front elevation, which is there, southeast elevation.
Thank you. Just wondering whether we can also turn to the cross sections, please. The ones where the floor and ceilings are coloured in blue. Just before there, Mr. Edmondson. Thank you. Just wondering whether we can enlarge that a little bit, by any chance. Yeah, brilliant. So that drawing, and also as it appears on the planning website, it's got 2 detailed cross sections of the floor and ceiling build-ups. It just occurs to me that they are quite considerably thick. We've got a floor that's 770 millimetres thick, and if we think about it, the average house, if you see your sort of upstairs floor as you go up your stairs, it's probably more like sort of 300 millimetres. It's maybe a step or a step and a half. 770 millimetres appears like 3 steps worth of stepping up through the thickness of a floor. I just wondered whether we think that's a little bit. Wonder whether that was a discussion that we might have had with the applicants during the process, because it seems to give rise to the heights, which seems to pick up on some of the concerns we've had articulated.
Through you, Chair. we have to have faith that architectural companies will draw plans based on what's going to get building regulation approval. So I'm taking it that the need for the thickness of flooring plus the insulation plus the need for the stability to be able to take the observation room construction and to be safe to be able to build the balcony area is such that they've built on existing structures and included that insulation between. But I think it's probably also to create the minimum potential floor to ceiling height in that top area, 2.1 metres, and to create that stairwell in the centre area to get up there, and to prevent any, looking at the need for a lift as well, prevent any changes in level between the balcony area, the observation room, and minimising the change in level at that point. So that wouldn't have been part of any negotiations to reduce that. But I don't think that adversely affects the front elevation to the point where we find it unacceptable in design terms. But I know the point you're making, because on the front elevation there appears to be quite a difference between the head height of the windows and then the height of the ceiling, the height of the balcony area.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Are you happy with your answers there?
The answers are helpful, thank you, yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fox. Thank you.
Just referring back to the MPPF and paragraph 130 that was referred to by the consultant, little e within that section does talk about optimising the potential of a site. Admittedly, it talks about appropriate amounts as well, but optimisation of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. And what I think we've got to consider is whether the impacts on the residents and surrounding residents' amenity and living conditions and on the street scene are unacceptable. And on the former of those two, when we were on site, I couldn't see any direct lines of sight that concerned me. And on the second argument about the street scene, I think you've got a kind of cadence coming down, which I felt was acceptable. And I think the difficulty we've got in this area is I don't think there's one
Councillor Fox,
particular street scene.
Is there a question or are you running into debate?
I'm running into debate due to my inexperience, and I really apologise.
No, that's quite all right. We will come back to you when we hear debate. But just at the moment, we're looking for further questions to the officers. Thank you, Councillor Darling.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's a visual question, really, and I do apologise I didn't make the site visits this morning. In the presentation and the report, we talk a lot about the properties either side. Are you able to give me some sort of idea of the distance from the property to the distance to the properties on Woodbourne Close?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Darling. Yes, the distance to number 45 is 5.7 metres, and the distance to 41 is 5.2 metres, so that's the distance from property to property. But in terms of the properties behind to Woodbourne Close, we stood beneath, I'll go back to that. You can see this is, members of the committee can see this is 43, and the back there at number 10, we specifically looked at it being raised by one of the councillors earlier on. And whilst there was a high hedge between the properties, you could just make out the gable end of that property there, number 10, which is one of the objectors. But in terms of overlooking, that is a much higher level than this property. And yes, we're going up by 1.9 metres, but I think officers would still dispute that point about there being overlooking down into the property behind, into habitable spaces.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Darling. Did that answer your question? Thank you very much. Any more questions from members? Councillor Billings.
I think it would probably help, through you, Madam Chair, if officers could just show up on screen what specific windows the the objectors have been concerned about in relation to the drawings, just to draw that point out a little bit more, please.
Through you, Chair, on this rear elevation, the northwest elevation, I'll just try and enlarge that slightly. There was specific reference from the speaker representing number 10 Wimborne Close behind the property, and that's what I was just referring to about that change in level and the planted boundary. There are 3 windows on that top floor level, double glazed units, and 1 obscure glazed window at the back, and those are serving that observation space in the top there. And then I imagine there could be as well comments to do with, albeit it's a high level obscure glaze window, to the only window on the southwest elevation, which is that one there on the side. The other side's been kept free of any fenestration at all. And the further point about overlooking, I imagine, would be accessing the balcony and potential looking back towards properties either side, and we're trying to address that with a planning condition.
If I just explore that slightly, Mr. Evanson, so the proposed high-level screens on either side would address the looking back. The side window at high level, my understanding from the proposals, is obscured. So what we're really talking about are these 3 windows on the rear. Would that be a fair assessment? Is that?
Realise I've lost my laser pointer. Here we are. Yes, those 3 windows are the ones I referred to, and were referred to in the objectors' comments from the properties behind. But those are the ones that are causing the most concern. I don't believe the side elevation, high level, obscure glaze one is causing any issues. So.
And looking on that rear elevation, if we were to see the drawing which appears to the right-hand side from that rear elevation, could you describe to us the so on the right-hand drawing on screen, could you describe to us the upstairs windows that are on the property to the right, as it appears, that's not shown on that drawing? Because that property to the right is 2-storey, isn't it?
I don't have an image of the adjoining property in relation to this. I think the only one on the street is on the street scene as opposed to the rear. But we did look across today to adjoining properties' windows to get a feel for the proximity and for the angles from this site to adjoining properties.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, if there are no further questions, perhaps we can move to debate. And anyone like to lead off the debate? Thank you. Councillor Billings.
I would like to go back to the cross-section drawings that we've seen, the ones with the blue. To me, this was a lost opportunity to provide something with a thinner floor and ceiling section. To me, the thicknesses of those floors and ceilings are considerably thicker than proposals that I've seen in other plans that have come before this committee. They're also generating a fenestration appearance with the distance between that upstairs floor and the head of the downstairs window on the right-hand side that appears to me to be considerably different. Some of the more modern properties that are some distance away up the road, to that distance there, thank you, Mr. Edmondson, that you're highlighting. And I just wondered whether other members had similar views, that perhaps if these had been somewhat thinner, the overall heights had been somewhat lower, whether that would have ameliorated some of the concerns in relation to the flow along the street scene, particularly to the properties to the right-hand side, where the heights which we're picking up are ridge heights, which are some distance away visually as you see them from the road, and often you can't really see the ridge heights because you're mainly seeing eaves heights rather than on this, which because it's a flat roof, it will be very clear where the where the heights are. I think from my perspective that was maybe a lost opportunity in the proposals that came forward. I do hear the points made about the architects have tried to comply with regulations, but there might be alternatives that other architects have used on other schemes that might have helped ameliorate some of the height concerns here, perhaps.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Any further debates? Councillor Fox, I did intervene in your debate earlier. Did you want to carry on, or are you happy that you have finished?
I will resolve to do better in this and not come out with inappropriate comments at the wrong time. I take what Councillor Billings has said, but we've got to view the application as it stands, not what it might be. Just like when a planning inspector looks at a development plan, he's not looking at or she's not looking at the best possible development plan, but whether it crosses a certain line of soundness. And it's whether it's harmful in terms of its impact on the street scene, and whether it's harmful in relation to the living conditions. Those are the two things we've got to base our consideration on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Any further debate? Councillor Billings.
I think I'd probably endorse what officers have done in terms of the negotiations thus far to provide a scheme that I think the decision in front of this committee would have been a lot easier had we seen the original proposals, which had the first floor being flank walls being directly going above the ground floor flank walls. I would have shared officers' concerns very strongly on that. Personally, had I been the applicant putting this forward, I think I would have done something slightly different. Yes, Councillor Fox, I do hear your point about we're assessing something whether it's sufficiently bad to refuse often, rather than whether it's brilliant and we want to say it's great and endorse it. That's often the question that that this committee is effectively being asked. But I do feel that some of the points that I was articulating earlier would have ameliorated some of the concerns in terms of providing something that sat closer to particularly number 41. I think when you see number 41 from the road, the ridge line appears very much to disappear away from you in terms of the height, and I don't believe this one will. So in the relation to how those two properties sit next to one another, I do think with this is a harder ask than it could otherwise have been, perhaps, if there had been an alternative design solution.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Darling, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In light of that, I'm wondering if it's something that we can go back to the developer and say, you know, can you lower it a little bit by doing these things that Councillor Billings is saying, and in which case that would then mitigate some of the worries that some of the neighbours have from behind, that obviously feel that they are going to be overlooked and their privacy is going to be removed. And I know the report says that may not be the case, but I just wondered, in some sort of compromise, is this something we are able to do?
Thank you. Well, I know that was in debate, but I think there may have been a question there as well to our officers. Is that acting reasonably and acceptable, or can we have a little feedback on that, please?
We always say, and Simon probably would say the same, is that you have to determine what's here in front of you today based on the designs that are there. We've sought amendments and sought improvements, as Councillor Billings has referred to, and made, in our views, a considerable amount of difference with the scheme. There is an element I can see of asymmetry with this building, because it's not a a traditional looking building. It's got windows at different heights, it's got different size windows, and they've tried to reflect that in what they've done above. But this is the piece that Councillor Billings is referring to. I really believe that that's part and parcel of the construction of this extension, this alteration, and why they've shown it as that thickness. And even the ceiling above is thick, but I think that's the requirement of building regulations as well on the roof itself. So I really consider we've got to consider what's in front of us today. So.
Yep, quite understand that. Councillor Paignton, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I think to echo that point, I mean, you know, we can't indulge in counterfactual history in terms of we have to consider what's in front of us. And in the interest of, I'm sensing a reluctance to kind of move things on this one, but in the course of the questions and the debate that I've heard and the speakers, I haven't heard anything that actually would give us reasonable grounds to refuse this on planning grounds with the relevant policies and the things that I've heard here this afternoon. My sympathies with those objections notwithstanding. So in the interest of trying to move things on, I would be happy to move approval at that appropriate stage, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Paignton. Duly noted. We'll just go to Councillor Billings, and then if there are no more debate, we will come back to you. Thank you. Councillor Billings. Thank you.
Well, I sort of thank you, officers, for the view on your understanding of why the build-ups are as thick. I appreciate what members have shared in terms of we're assessing the scheme before us. My opinion is that they could have come forward with something thinner. We don't regularly and routinely see ceiling build-ups at 770 millimetres. That's not regularly on applications before us, and therefore I would simply highlight that there must be other alternative solutions that could have come forward that could maybe have ameliorated some of these points.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Would the officer want to come back on that one, or shall we go to further debate?
I'm happy for you to go to further debate. It's made me think, though, that it would be useful on occasions to have one of my building control colleagues just beside me here or on the end of a phone to just clarify some of those structural things, because, to be honest, it's not necessarily part and parcel of what a planning officer might look at in terms of the detailed construction, because it will be assessed as part of the building regulation consideration. But I do see when design elements are brought in like that, and it does change the external appearance, you know, how important that can be to you in your decision making as well. But I don't believe there's any deliberate sort of building up to create something unnecessary, and I still believe the impact on the street scene and on neighbours is acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Billings?
Just as a final question before you go, Madam Chair, presumably so, Councillor Paignton's proposal, I just thought it might assist the debate. Were other members concerned about any specific windows in relation to having explored? Because overlooking is one of the points we've had objectors refer to. I've been talking about heights and visual impacts, massing and amenity for the street scene, but I'm aware I haven't touched on overlooking, and I'm not sure whether that's a concern for other members. I believe we've got in our previous design guidance, Mr. Edmondson, I believe we've got some stated visibility distances. I'm just wondering whether you could just highlight to us what those normally are and in relation to how this complies for those 3 windows at the back. Thank you.
We looked at habitable rooms in terms of distances. I mean, from my own impression on the site, the changes in level and the distance involved, I mean, I would have thought it's not a direct angle, it's on an angle, but I would have thought it's in excess of I think it's the 20 metre sort of figure that we normally look at. But perhaps if I put that law plan up, site plan up, I'll give you an indication. And then again, it's into habitable rooms. This is a considerably, it's hard to get that image to show the difference in height between these properties, but 10 Wimborne Close is that much higher in terms of this side, and looks down onto this property significantly as we were there, but I don't believe it would breach those issues of overlooking. So.
Excuse me, sir, with respect, please don't call out please, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Any more debate from members, please? Okay, if there's no more debate, can I go back to Councillor Paignton, who has moved approval, and any further to add? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just to say, you know, in the course of these questions, the debate and the speakers, like I said, no member of this committee has conveyed something that they've identified and held up as a planning reason that why we shouldn't approve this. We've heard a lot about, like I said, counterfactual history. Wouldn't it be nice if the applicant did this, but that's not good form for a planning committee. We need to consider what's on the table in front of us. And given, as I've said, we haven't heard, or I haven't heard anything in the course of this afternoon, a solid, in planning grounds, reason to refuse anything, I will move, in the interest of moving things on, approval as per the officer's recommendation in the report.
Thank you very much. Can I just point out that, as mentioned, the officer's recommendation in the report, and I think the term we're looking for is planning permission granted, subject to, and I'll just read this out, the conditions, the recommendations of the presentation.
Madam Chairman, if I may, just to outline that in the report, obviously there are various conditions that members will have considered at this meeting. There are two conditions that appear on the presentation. They are the standard conditions, just providing that final drafting of the conditions delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, and the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee are delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning. So it's just to make that very clear.
Yes,
Thank you.
and obviously, for clarity, as per Mr Edmondson's recommendation given in his presentation.
Thank you. We just needed to clear that one up. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stevens. Do we have any debate on this issue? Thank you. Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Whilst I appreciate there's a range of judgments on this, personally I consider the height and the massing that we were alluding to in relation to the questions that I was referring to, and the thickness of the floor and ceiling build-ups, I think that speaks to the scale and massing and the impact on the street scene. And personally, I think that could give rise to a reason for refusal if one determined that that was unacceptable. And in my eyes, it was something that I thought would be significantly impacting. And so personally, I wasn't. I wouldn't share the view that there are no reasons why this, in relation to the discussion earlier, that would allow this to be refused. Personally, I consider the build-ups to be quite substantial, and I think it will provide an impact on the street scene that personally I'm not comfortable with. But I appreciate other members might have different views.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Any further debate on the motion? Okay, thank you very much. We will now go to the vote. All in favour of the motion? Thank you. That's 3. No. And against? 4. Yep, so. Any abstentions? Just the one, thank you. Thank you. Okay, that application is now lost. So obviously we are looking for refusal. Councillor Billings.
So, through you, Madam Chair, could I have clarity about what the next proposal could be? I just wondered whether there's an opportunity to require the applicant to come back with some revised drawings if we were to adjourn, to defer this to a further meeting.
Through you, Chair, there is always the opportunity for a recommendation for deferral, and you have to give good reasons for that deferral. My response to Councillor Paignton's question earlier about determining what's in front of us is the normal advice we would give as officers, but you always have the ability to defer an application for reasons that you give that are good planning reasons. So you have that opportunity. And I won't say any more than that at the moment in terms of what our views would be on a refusal and opportunities at appeal and things. So, yeah, that is within your gift.
Councillor Billings.
My concerns relate not to the overlooking. Personally, I wasn't persuaded by that point. My concerns relate to the visual appearance and massing from the street scene of the bulk of the building, recognising that it's flat roofed, and because it's flat roofed, the ridge line of the proposal is that much further forward when viewed from a human level on the street than it shows on a drawing in relation to a flat drawing as we've got here. And so my concerns relate to the fact that insufficient work's been put in to recognise that fact and ameliorate that. Now, I would be open as to whether that's dealt with by giving the applicant the opportunity to come back through a deferral with revised drawings, or whether that's a refusal at this stage with some guidance as in relation to the applicant coming back in the future. My concerns simply relate to the fact that because it's flat roofed, the ridge line and the eaves are that much further. The high point is that much further forward from the street scene than on the two properties either side. So whilst I'm quite happy to refuse, I just wonder whether there are other options that officers might want to suggest that would be more efficient for the original applicant.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Edmondson.
It would be more efficient for the applicant to have that opportunity to amend it, but it won't address a lot of the residents' complaints, objections to this application. But you could achieve a reduction in that overall height of the building if, from a building regulations point of view, it's achievable with that condensing of the thickness of the floors and the roof, and that would come back with a reduction of potentially 300-400 mil, but it's still going to have the same design appearance of the building, which I recognise others feel isn't appropriate in that street scene. But that is an opportunity to do that. Would you be seeking it to return to this planning committee as well with those reductions? And can we be explicit about what's achieved? Because it is only the height, not any shifting of the position of the extension. As you've mentioned already, you're comfortable with the overlooking issues. It's more about the height itself.
From my perspective, and whilst I do recognise the concerns that have been articulated very strongly by the objectors and very ably by those professional persons representing them, I think if I looked at other roads around Torbay, the overlooking, which I do accept will be an issue here, it's not any worse than on lots of other roads that we see around Torbay. And when I refer back to seeing whether we could substantiate as a committee that as a reason for refusal, bearing in mind that is a position that we don't often get to around Torbay as a whole, and bearing in mind what our suggested privacy distance standards are on one of the oldest SPDs we've got, I don't think we could substantiate a reason for refusal based on overlooking. Whilst I hear the points that have been made about the type of the building and the modern form, if I were to travel along the road going to the left-hand side from this property, a bit further around, the two modern properties that have been developed, the the concerns articulated in relation to this, that it doesn't fit the character because the character is sloped roofs, that could equally have been applied to those two modern properties when they were put there. So I again don't feel that this committee, even if it wanted to, could provide a solid reason for refusal based off the style of proposal, which is modern rather than traditional. To me, what this is the visual impact of the bulk and the massing from the road as you're looking up to it, particularly in relation to the property on the right-hand side, I think number 41, because of the height of the roof relative to how the height of 41 appears, because it recedes in view, because it's sloped. And to me, that's the concern. And personally, I would be relatively happy with some proposals that provided for amelioration of that, whether it's setting back the front flank wall of the upstairs to set it further back, whether it's to drop the height, which I think there's clear scope for, but something that made it set better in the street scene. That's where my concerns are, Madam Chair. And so I'm quite happy to propose either a refusal on that ground, but I do think there's a more efficient opportunity, and I would suggest we should perhaps defer it to a future committee or give officers the delegated approval to approve something that address those concerns, perhaps.
Thank you. So are we clear that, are you proposing deferment?
Do officers believe that they could negotiate with the applicant to provide something that addressed those concerns, perhaps?
We would certainly do that as your instruction as this committee, if that's what you vote on for deferral, and we would bring it back to you, I think, rather than deal with it as a delegated item. And I don't know if the agent is here for the applicant, and I don't know if the applicant is here or watching online, but you know, and there isn't an opportunity for them to comment, but we would go back to them and try and bring it back to you as swiftly as we could in terms of an application revision. It's a bit unusual, but I can see that you're minded to support the principle of this, but you just want to get that height and street scene issue sorted.
I think also, and I just to highlight it, if the thickness of the floor void to the first floor was thinner, the viewpoint position in relation to those being overlooked to the rear, that would be lower, and so it would hope, I appreciate it wouldn't be substantive, and it's not behind my reasoning, but it would help ameliorate some of those concerns because the viewpoint would be lower. And so, Madam Chair, having heard that, my proposal would be for deferral with a view to a revised drawing coming back to this committee that through a reduced thickness of floor and ceiling provided either for a reduced height or through a revised layout of the first floor, a further setback, because I'm concerned about the appearance and massing on the street scene of the current proposals.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Mr Edmondson, are you happy with, or not happy, but are you, any comments on that, please?
No, we would refer the relevant policies in the local plan and the neighbourhood plan in that reason for deferral to address those points and go back to the applicants and seek that amendment. If no further amendments come in, then it'll come back to you. Or perhaps you could give us delegated authority to then refuse the application if, or no, we'll bring it back to you anyway to committee. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So you're proposing...
So yes, Chair,
deferment?
I'm proposing deferral on those grounds.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Do we have a seconder for deferment? Councillor Lewis, thank you.
Happy to second that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, any debate? Thank you. So we will go to the vote. All in favour of deferment? Thank you. And against the motion on the table? 2. Okay, thank you very much. So it is now that we're approving for deferment. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for attending the Planning Committee. The meeting is now closed. I look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting and wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you.